Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's episode of the Mastering Retention podcast. Today, I am delighted to have Miss Martina Gianfreda with us, who is the CEO of Whatwapp. Did I say that right?
Yeah, right. Hi, Tom. Thanks for having me.
It's going to be a lot of fun. And probably one of the first questions I'm going to ask you is actually how you came up with that name. So it'll be fun. But before we get into all that fun stuff, I always like to ask, what's your story? Like, how'd you get into games?
Okay, nice. So, hi, everyone. My story, I would say it's quite simple. So I've been, loving games since I was a child. I was more into, physical games, I'd say, rather than video games, because my parents were not very happy having me, playing at the computer or PlayStation.
Me too.
Oh my God. Uh, anyways, so I went to the university, and that's where I met Alessandro. We are both computer science engineers. We studied here in Milan. And we met, we became friends quite early on, and at some point Ale was starting to dig a bit more into games and the Android and the apps world. And at some point he was developing these games. They were very simple games, and they were paid ones. And I still remember, this is an inside joke for us, but I remember texting him one day, and I was like, "Hey Ale, this is really cool what you're doing, but your graphics sucks. So what are you gonna do about it?" And he was like, "Well, can you do better?" And flash forward to today, we are at Whatwapp together. We started building games with a very well-known core gameplay, because we are no game designers ourselves. And that's how basically we got into some of our games are car games, the most successful ones actually. And what was a real hook for us was the relationship with the users, because early on they started to commenting our games, requesting features, and we were very fast in answering those requests. And that's what got us really excited, and we were like, okay, you know what, we want to try to do this for a living. Let's see how this goes. And that's how Whatwapp was actually born.
That's super cool. How did you come up with that name? Like, where did that come from?
Oh, Tom, I'm sorry, I cannot tell you that. because we have this another inside joke that all our employees can actually learn what's behind that name after 1 year in the company. So I cannot really tell you. I'm sorry.
So I need to bribe an employee,
huh? Probably, yeah. But again, that's a really, really funny story, and something that you would not expect.
So basically, for all the curious listeners, they need to move to Italy, work for you guys for a year, and then they can uncover this secret.
Exactly. I mean, the moving part is not really requested. Maybe we can cover that part later, but yeah, they need to work with us for at least 1 year.
I love it. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit, because I don't have too many founders on here, but I don't know, like I actually posted about it earlier today, and I've been getting a lot of people just like asking me questions about like, I want to start a game studio, or I want to start a game company. Maybe I have a co-founder, a few, maybe I don't have any. What's your take on like, what should you look for in a co-founder, or what should your ideal, game studio team be? Like if you wanted to start a new studio today, like who would you look for? What would you look for in that kind of founding team?
Yeah. So, well, going back to the founder, probably what I would suggest is to have, but it's just the two of us right now, myself and Alessandro. And, if we had, I don't know, 2 more co-founders, it would be easier to cover some, key aspects of the company growing up. Because if you don't have a co-founder for that, you need to find a very, a couple of very good people to cover that part for you. So what should you look for in a co-founder? I can tell you my experience, which, I'm not saying is the correct one, but what is really working between Alessandra and I is that, well, first of all, we quite soon realized that we were sharing the same values. The fun part is that Whatwapp doesn't have like official values yet, but I know that we shared some very core values between us, and this is something that I recently realized actually. Then we have trust in each other, and the fact that we are actually reliable. And I can tell you once, an episode that happened even before the official Whatwapp was born, which was the fact that even though we were just 2 friends working together, I was doing some graphics for some of his games. I was feeling that, strong commitment in the fact that I gave him my word that, some kind of work would have been done within the night, So it was, for me, it was no brainer that, that piece of art should have been delivered within the night.
Yep.
And, today, having worked with so many people, I can tell you it's not that easy to find, even though, because we were no co-workers, we were just 2 friends working together, and they had the same, the same reliability, say, to me. So I think that was the profound foundation. And to answer the second part of the question, I think that you should ideally have someone who's good with people, meaning that it's someone able to talk to other people, to, tell the story about your studio, because at some point you will need to find people who will work with you and will build your studio, right?
Yep.
Because you're just the starter pack, and then everything will be built on that. Someone who's very good with the tech side of it. So, for example, Ale was the game developer, the very first game developer that we had. I was the artist, say. Someone with marketing, and another one probably with data/infrastructure or tools. Ideally, these are I would say, the 4 pillars for the company.
So tech, marketing, art, and probably like data analytics.
Yeah, instead of art, I would say people, someone who's able, to hire talents and understand what we need, and has also, this business vision of the kind of roles that you actually need to cover.
Yeah. How do you pick who's the CEO?
I can tell you my experience with Ale. So we are both co-CEOs. And the reason for that is that because I think that we are very much complementary minds. And I'm not saying that, that's the perfect fit, but I think it works quite well for us. We've been in the business for the past 9 years, and, we've been profitable since day one. We must, do something right somewhere. So I would say that what's working with us is that I tend to be the more, impulsive person, the more, the gut feeling person. He's the analytical one. He's more, way more stable, say, from that point of view. And, sometimes I try to pull him towards me. Sometimes the other part happens. So, I would say that ideally you should find someone who's able to have both sides. That would be, the perfect fit. But I don't think it's quite common and or easy.
Yeah.
What do you think of that?
I've heard, well, I've heard it outlined in a lot of different ways.
Mm-hmm.
I think the maybe most prominent one is like the golden pairs concept of your Steve Jobs, the more impulsive visionary leaders, which I would probably put myself as. Sounds like maybe you're kind of that way. And then there's the Steve Wozniaks, or the, Ali in this case, or on my team, Garrick, the more like grounded people that are like, Tom, your head is like 3 years away from now. Like, we got to get back to like today. We got real stuff we got to deal with. So I think you need those kind of two-factor people, and it may be possible to find it in a single person, but I think it's very, very rare. So you almost need the visionary, and then the operator is another term that I've heard, where the visionary can kind of see the future. The operator actually goes through the day-to-day steps to actually get to where that
Exactly.
vision, that future is going to be.
Exactly. Yeah. I totally agree with you.
Cool. Well, you already answered one of my next questions, which was what was the things that you should look for in a co-founding team. So, okay, well, that was great. I want to switch gears a little bit, because you guys have been able to do what very few studios have done, which is successfully launch a game, and then not even just a game, but multiple games. And I'm curious, what is your process or your take on how do you come up with new game concepts? How do you test them, figure out like, what is this winner going to be? Because I see so many games that ultimately like seem like they're very good quality, they're very fun, they're very interesting, and then they get into soft launch or whatnot, and they just flop for whatever reason. So I'm curious, like, what's your process for coming up with a new game?
So, really, the process is very, we start on a very high level, which is what do we want to achieve as a company, right? So a good example for us would be that we want to scale Whatwapp. So the first thing would be, okay, how can we actually build something that can help us scale? And that goes with many, possible strategies that you can actually follow. And again, that's when, the analytical part kicks in, and we're like, okay, what can we actually achieve with what we have? What will we need to actually build that, or this, or whatever? And this is like on a very high level. Then we are like, okay, in terms of games, do we have the expertise to actually build, I don't know, an RPG game or something? Well, probably everybody in the company would love to do that, but maybe we don't have, the people who actually have that kind of expertise. So we would be like, okay, we can just, take this to the side and focus on something that we already tried, or something else. And that's where we're like, okay, say that we only have experience with card games. So the most easy answer for us would be, okay, let's just stick with another card game. Can we then find another card game that is big enough to help us scale, but at the same time, sorry, we think we can actually, we have the expertise and the skill to build it. And that just goes down the funnel. And this is what we actually did. I can tell you a couple of examples. So the first one that was no good strategy was that we tried building a bingo game back in 2018, very late 2018. And we then realized that the execution had some problems. We had no experience with, I don't know, benchmark data. What should be the retention for this kind of game? What kind of a monetization can we expect out of it? And all these things were, had us struggle a bit on that. So we decided to kill the game. And what we did last year instead was running another strategy. So we were like, okay, as you said, today we have 3 games which more or less look like similar games. Why don't we just use these games as templates and just build other, card games in other countries. And that was hard as well, because we spent some time building this team, which was called Game Factory. The goal of the team was to build this template, and then the Game Factory will then pass on the, let's say, the shell to another team that would be, in charge of the soft launch and everything. And it was, this strategy was not good either, because we were struggling finding, market fit, or again, the execution was quite hard. So I would say that, the short answer to your question is that we first think about the goal, and then we're like, okay, do we actually have the expertise to do this, or we know nothing about it? Because, at the end of the day, knowing nothing is just like, getting your job even harder, I think.
Yeah.
But as I said, on the other hand, doing something that you think you already know that you can do doesn't mean that you will find success.
So you talked a little bit about strategy in terms of like, is this going to help us achieve our goals? So do you guys have some sort of overarching, let's say, like vision for the company of here's where we're trying to get to, 5 or 10 years from now? And if you do have that, you use that as like a lens to be like, okay, well, here's this idea. When I look at it with the lens, it's not going to help us get there, so we don't do that thing. But this other thing does help us get there.
Yeah, let's say that I don't know if it's like 5 years, in the future, but we do have this vision where we would like to get Whatwapp to the next level, which is again having, maybe a more global game, just to get more users and, increase the company from that point of view. But yeah, absolutely. When we are like that, we are always looking at, does this actually make sense? This specific action, why is this action helping us reaching our goal? And then if the answer is, is not clear enough, or is not aligned with where we want to go, we just drop it.
Yeah, that makes sense. So most of your games, would you say they're mostly popular like card games in Italy?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have Italy and France.
Yeah. Have you, tried to take any of them to like another country and like, go through the process of teaching a card game? Or have you found that with card games, it's a universal game that's played in all countries, let's say maybe solitaire. I don't know if that's the case, but I'm assuming so. Or as, like, then I find that there are some games that are very country or even region specific within countries. And I feel like it might be difficult to take that and teach that entire card game if you didn't grow up playing it. Have you found that's the case, or is it possible to kind of go through that additional education step?
That's a really nice question, because this is something, I wonder about a lot, actually. And the answer is, I don't know the answer, because I think there are some games which are complicated enough that, learning how to play them is quite hard for anyone. I tried, many different games, card games, in my life since I started Whatwapp, and I can tell you there are some quite complex games out there, while there are some others which are instead quite easy. So, the question is, why no other company ever, at least as far as I know, ever tried or was even, successful in doing something like that? Probably there is something, very challenging there. That doesn't mean that we won't, try maybe someday, because, having games that are very targeted for a specific country helps you a lot with focus. So you can just worrying about, one specific target, and you can just optimize the game to the maximum. And this is something that I think we were quite able to do. Of course, that leaves out all, the whole challenge, which is, okay, can we actually, increase the potential of this game? Can we actually find other or more players to that can actually learn the game or love the game as it is? I don't have the answer yet, but if we will try to and we will succeed, I guess you will hear about us.
Yeah. Well, here's an interesting, idea that I, might noodle over. So perhaps, like, I don't know if you can study like games. Let's say you want to go to the US. I don't think I've actually played Scopa La Fida, but probably should, because we talk enough that I should, have a better idea of it. But I'm assuming that if that game doesn't exist in the US, maybe there's a somewhat similar card game. So like take euchre and spades and hearts. They're all kind of like similar in the realm of like you have the trump card or something like that. And I think it would be a lot easier for me to, let's say, convert a spades or a heart player to a euchre player than it would be for me to take someone that's maybe only played solitaire and convert them to a euchre player, because there's so much additional context that you have to teach. Whereas, if you're going from a game that already has trump to a slightly different variant, they at least understand the general concepts, and then you just have to teach them the nuances of the rules.
Yeah, I would say that, this makes sense. But when we talk about how do you market this, right? How do you try to convince someone who's, really hooked with spades and be like, hey, why don't you try this other game, which is kind of similar, but not that much with the game that you already love.
Yeah.
So I think that one big advantage for, having these classical games is that people already know how to play them. Maybe there is some kind of, distant memory because they used to play it with some, when they were younger, or maybe with their parents. So there's market for that, and it's quite easy. But when it comes to convincing people to play a new game, then my question for you would be, how would you, run marketing for these people? How would you convince them?
Well, here's an interesting idea that I'm going to throw out. This is going to be a fun podcast episode altogether. And something that I've thought about a lot are there consequences of us continually having separate game entities? Like, would it make more sense to have kind of a single app or game where I can come and I can choose whatever games I want to play? So you could have chess in there, you could have solitaire in there, you could have Scopa La Fida, all these different things. And so when I know that I want to play hearts, I just open up that game and I can click and play hearts with people to my heart's content. I don't have to ever choose any of those other games, but maybe you start to introduce some live ops events or something, and maybe Scopa La Fida, if you play it and check it out, you can get some interesting things, and it could be a way that you can introduce people across different games and different genres. But as a user, it's really nice that I don't have to have 15 different card games. I just have the one that I go to. So I don't know. Have you ever considered something like that? I think somebody did that in the MENA region.
There is one, but I still remember talking to someone who was working in a company that was doing precisely this. This guy was mentioning that it was very hard to do the measurement on marketing activities, because they were not really able to understand why this person was actually downloading their game, their app, because they were not able to, it was a mess. But I think that there is some other, there's another challenge, probably bigger to what you mentioned. So if I have to start learning a new game, right? A new card game. Why do I do it? Why do I do that in real life? So if I think about my personal experiences, because maybe I am, with some friends, and then, we are out at night, maybe without internet, and they're like, oh, look, I have this deck of cards. Why don't we try, spades? And I'm like, I don't know how to play spades. And they're like, well, we teach you. And then you
Yep.
spend the night, learning the game. So if you try to compare this experience into the app, where I have other games, either I'm like super fan of card games for whatever reason, and I spend my time to learn all these games.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I don't think it's gonna be very, very successful. Not for this specific, having this specific goal. Also, there are some variants for the games, like Scope, our game has many different variants. And if you want to, do some proper, if you want to offer, say, a proper product to your users who are in love with the game itself, you need to manage all, these requests, these variants. So I think it's, it depends on which level you actually want to build these, say, content for your players. So it can work, but at the end of the day, I think it really, as always, it depends on the goal that you have.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Speaking of marketing a little bit, we have entered this post IDFA world. COVID, is kind of pulling back. Google is just about to also implement their version of IDFA. How has marketing and growth and stuff for your games, has that changed at all in the last few years?
Yeah, it did. Of course, just like I think all the other gaming companies, we saw a huge boost during COVID. So we had so many new players engaging with our games, and we spent a good part of 2021 trying to keep these players and acquire more players. It was hard. It was way more expensive because our main market is Android, and we had no real impact on iOS users because we don't have much activity on that platform in terms of user acquisition. But all those companies that stopped doing user acquisition on iOS, they turned to Android, and that had the CPIs skyrocket. So we are in the process of understanding what's the best strategy to actually, run user acquisition today. We are also looking for a head of growth, actually, for the marketing department. So let me do this very live hiring placement. But yeah, I think this is one of the challenges for this role, like having different games. Like all our games are in a different stage of their own life. And this is a challenge per se, I think. And then I'm looking also for someone who's gonna be able to help us scale the company. So I'm having all this conversation with people, and one of my question is exactly what you asked me, like, what did you do when the iOS 14 revolution hit? Where were you? What were you doing? How did you react? And the interesting thing is that I am getting so many different answers. There are the people who say, well, it didn't change anything for us because we were able to do some magic. There are some others who are like, yeah, we just turn to the probabilistic attribution. and we're doing the other way. And you can get so many different answers. My answer for you is that we don't know yet.
Have you
And I'm
guys ever?
looking for someone who
Yeah.
knows.
So what's your ideal, head of growth candidate that you're, thinking about? Like, what would be your dream candidate?
So I think that, the answer I always give to this question is that I am looking for someone who's able to answer different challenges with different solutions. And to that is also able to apply common sense.
Yeah. Do you have an example of what that actually means?
I mean, it sounds very basic, right? But too many times I talk to people who are like, I had a similar situation to that because maybe I was working on, I don't know, social casino game, for example, and we did this strategy which worked, so let's apply this strategy. And you're like, okay, this is actually what we do. So we're like, okay, can you tell me why do you think this should work? How can we actually measure if this is gonna work or not? What do you have any data that can actually help you understand if that's gonna work or not? I mean, at the end of the day, marketing is always, testing new strategies. I get that. But when you do that, you need to actually put some thoughts on that and be like, okay, I think this is going to work, because too many times it's like, well, the account manager suggested, and I'm like, no no, the account manager, this is not a good answer for me.
Yeah. Have you guys ever tried any sort of marketing or growth tactics beyond just like your standard paid performance marketing?
To be honest with you, no. Because the marketing department in Whatwapp was born just like 2 years ago. And, we were running just performance marketing. And the reason why I am looking for, right now, I'm not looking for, UA manager or head of UA, but I'm looking for growth, is because I think that we need someone with a very broad view to that. I don't know how to run, effective campaigns. I don't know how to market in the best way our games, let alone how to launch a new product on a new market. But I am looking for someone who's a generalist enough, in order to understand how can actually this person can bring a different point of views on a specific issue that we have. So no, we didn't, because there was, never the need until, I would say, January this year. And that's when we started to be like, okay, let's do some proper search.
Yeah.
If you have anything to suggest, I mean, I'm all ears.
Well, so I'm becoming more and more fascinated, like, paid performance marketing. Well, at the end of the day, really the only winner is Facebook and Google, because they can figure out algorithmically how much can I, charge you for this, and they can just keep getting a bigger and bigger portion of that. And, the advertiser at the end, game gets a little bit, and you end up getting a little bit of that LTV, but the rest of it just goes to, Google and Facebook. There's a book that I read last year that I really liked. It was by Andrew Chen, called The Cold Start Problem. And so Andrew Chen was, he might have been the first one, but he was like very early and in the growth department of Uber. And so you got some interesting stories about Uber, but the rest of the book, he talks about, growing other businesses and stuff like that, especially those with network effects. I would imagine a card game, after a fashion, has some level of that, because it's probably more fun to play Scopa if I can play that with my other like friends and family, and I can, rub it in their face, even if we're far away or whatnot.
Oh yeah.
So the Cold Start Problem basically says that when you have any sort of like networked platform or solution or whatnot, be that Uber or Airbnb or Scopa or whatnot, you have to figure out like what's the hard side of the market and how do I get this thing going? Because usually once you get it going, it can kind of grow organically. And I was very fascinated with how Tinder got started. So Tinder, for them, the hard side of their market was women. And not only that, but you have to almost have like micro networks, because you have to have that vicinity, and you have to have a large enough amount of women that you can actually like match with people. And so how they launched is they went to, forget which college, some college in like LA, I think somewhere in California. And they basically went and they found like the sorority that had like the hottest girls on campus, like a ton of them. And they threw a big party for them, like, you know, all inclusive, get all this beer. And it was like invite only. And they also invited like a few other like sororities and a few other like fraternities with like hot guys on campus. And the only like condition to get inside was you have to download Tinder and sign up for an account. And then suddenly Tinder just kind of took over the campus, because all the other guys were like, whoa, well, there's all these really hot girls on there, I'm going to sign up. And then all the girls were like, well, that's where all the guys are. And it kind of ballooned this organic, and then they figured out, oh, that worked. And then they went and they did that, you know, campus to campus. Now, I think when they wanted to roll out of colleges directly, they had other approaches and stuff like that. But that initial like sign up was just very fascinating to me. And I've never really heard of any games companies taking like a unique approach of how do we get this thing started. For Airbnb, their hard side of the market was property owners. How do we get, you know, property owners and stuff? And I think for a while until it got shut down, is they would scrape the web pages on Craigslist for people that were like renting houses, and they would just like pull them in and like generate Airbnb listings. So it seemed like they had all these like, you know, houses and opportunities and stuff. And it was just a very interesting, different approach that I don't really see game companies do too often. I think it'd be really cool to see, you know, like a card game company or something like, well, we're going to go to these particular conferences of people that are just like card game fanatics, and we're either going to introduce them to Scupa or whatever we're going to do. And like, how can we like get that organic, you know, network kind of started and go from there?
That's really interesting, actually. Yeah, I didn't know any of these stories. You know, and it's really fascinating to me as well. I would love, you know, to work with someone who's able to have this kind of crazy ideas. I would be very happy to follow up with that. But, you know, at some point I would still be like, okay, but where are the users, you know? So,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, I think that it could be really interesting, especially because our games rely very much on the social effect. So people, you know, our users build communities outside the game itself. They have Telegram groups, they have WhatsApp groups, they build the impossible on Facebook or everywhere. I mean, I just love them, to be honest. So that could, you know, that could actually work.
Yeah, that's interesting. Okay, I'm going to switch gears a little bit. I want to talk a little bit about building a games team. So, you know, you guys got started, kind of your first app, it was kind of just the two of you. Walk me through the process. Like, what was it like to go out and hire people? Like, did you make any big mistakes, or like, are there any lessons learned that, you know, you could share with folks that are, you know, just getting into this hiring phase?
Okay, where do I start? Well, you know, if I to give you a bit of context, when we started, the company was 2013. We are in Italy. There is no real, you know, gaming culture. We are still building that in the country. We were 24 and 25 years old. And, you know, we were out there be like, hey, it's just the two of us, want to work with us? And it was a disaster. It was really, really hard for us to find employees. So, you know, if I was to start today with the knowledge I have today, of course, I would start with hiring more experienced people at first, more senior people, like also because, you know, these are the people that are gonna, you know, who are gonna hire other people and That's just going to be way easier. In terms of errors, well, I mean, I would say that a common error is when you don't find what you're looking for, you tend to, negotiate with yourself because maybe you are in a hurry because for whatever reason, and you start like, well, maybe this person is not exactly what I wish this person was, but still, I think they can do the job. And that's usually, I would say, the number one mistake. So my suggestion for everyone would be look for the right person until you will find it. I think it's like when you start a relationship, right? At some point, you're gonna find the one, and that's it. That's the same for employees, I think, especially on a certain level, on a certain seniority. Then I think that within the game team, because we have different game teams dedicated to a product, I think that you should balance the kind of skills, soft skills and tech skills, the personalities that you're gonna put together, because the team needs to find its own balance, I would say. So you cannot always have like the top performer on everything, because at the end of the day, it's not gonna work. You cannot only have superstars. First of all, because there are not so many. Second of all, because I think that even the superstar needs to have someone around them who can actually help them get better and whatever. So yeah, I think that would be my very number one advice. And it's really hard for me because I am the one directly involved in the hiring processes. So if you ever want to have an interview at Whatwapp, you're gonna meet me at some point. But the person who's really the gatekeeper and helps me doing that and challenges me is Ale. So he's the one like, are you sure we are not, just lowering our expectations because we are not finding the right person? And that kind of challenge, that kind of, those kind of questions, they are really, really helpful at the end of the day, because once you are way too deep into something, you can, start missing out on some hints.
Yeah. Do you guys take, I know you mentioned you don't have official core values, at the company level, but, you and Ali kind of shared some core values and stuff. Do you guys look for those when you're interviewing people? Is it just kind of like a gut thing? Are they even important at all, or can they be just kind of taught to employees once they kind of get through the door?
No, I think we tend to share a principle, let's say. So one principle which is very important for us is, the fact that you should be aiming for some speed of action. So there are, people who are like, well, maybe there is some, I don't know, 1 hour task, and this person would be like, yeah, I'll tell you within tomorrow night. And you're like, why? I mean, of course, it's always a matter of priority, but at the same time, it's a matter also of flexibility. So I would say that we tend to look for people who are either very ambitious people, or if they are not ambitious people, we tend to look for people who, the way I define it is like, have the winning mindset, meaning that these people need to always set the bar very high for themselves, and thus that will set the bar high for the people around them, because they will expect the same level of of quality of commitment also from their coworkers. So I think that these are the two people we we tend to prefer, let's say. And yeah, then we have the speed of action, which is more or less a mindset in our opinions. Like, if you can get something done, just get it done. Like, don't procrastinate or just think about having the bigger project or whatever. It's just like, what's the most effective solution that you can find for this problem? Always a matter of balancing, the cost and the opportunity.
Yeah.
Part.
Do you guys use any sort of like skills-based test, take-home project, or do XYZ? Like, how do you figure out if someone's technical? So, as an example, I've found that there is a very big difference between, let's say, a good programmer and a great programmer. So, like, I can get stuff done from a coding perspective just by the force of my sheer willpower of just grunt forcing it. And then I remember the first time we actually hired and I watched the first, what I consider a real programmer. This dude went in Vim, and the stuff that he I was like, well, there's no way that just works. And it just did. It just blew me away. It was like, watching your favorite game that you thought you were good at on Twitch and just realizing you had no idea what was even going on. You're just a complete noob. I found that, the amount that great programmer can get done versus the good programmer is something between 10 to 100x more. But I also find that there's a really big balance of can you really test for that? Should you test for that? I know more senior people kind of get offended when you ask them to take a skills test. So I'm curious, what you guys process and approach is.
Well, I think, I guess the question for you would be, in this case, what do you think was the real difference between, the good programmer and the great programmer?
So, I don't know that I have enough experience to really say for real. Otherwise, I would have.
Let's think about it.
I think, one thing that we've generally found with people that are really great programmers is they just have this sheer love of coding and learning. So what do you do in your free time? Oh, well, this weekend I bought XYZ and I coded up some robot, or I learned this new language, or I did something. They do it just because the sheer fun and joy of it. And that's not always the case, especially as they start to have families and kids and other responsibilities and things like that. But it's almost like this willingness to explore. And then I would say, sometimes maybe good programmers are in the realm of well, I got really good at this language and this thing, and I don't really want to go out of that. I want to stay in this lane.
So you can see me nodding because I think you touched that. I think for programmers, as an example, curiosity makes all the difference. And again, that's, to me, is more like mindset and or a soft skill rather than, being like a dragon at writing code. So again, it's a matter of mindset. This is how I call it. Is it mindset? It can be, whatever. But at the end of the day, what makes the difference to me is curiosity for, these very technical roles.
Yep. Yeah. I don't know. I have found though that some, programmers will have that, and then they'll still fail the programming test more abysmally than, even I would. And again, I'm not a very good dad. It's if I can teach myself on the fly how to do XYZ and still do way better than this other candidate, it's well, hiring this person will obviously be lowering our standards. And so, do you still do some sort of technical test, or is it still just kind of on the fly? Yeah.
No, yeah, we do. But to answer your, this note, of course, there are some jobs that some people do, but that doesn't mean that they are the best at doing it. They can be, great on the soft skill side, but at the end of the day, they are not, good enough, let's say, to actually, excel in that specific job. So, and this is normal, right? So I was an average UX UI designer back then, and I was very curious. I was, self-taught on all the Adobe suite and everything, but at the end of the day, I was just not good enough. And that's life, right? So that's okay. And yeah, we do have this tech assessment, but yeah, then we try to do way more a soft skill assessment. So we have like 2 to 3 questions that can actually help us understand where you are as a person.
Yeah. Very interesting. Cool. Well, I know we're about out of time here. I feel like we could keep going for like another hour easily. It's lots of fun. But since we are on the Master Intention podcast, I always like to ask, what's one tip or trick or lesson you learned over the years, especially last year, 2021? How do you keep your players playing for longer? How do you keep them coming back day after day, week after week, hopefully year after year?
We would say social interaction within the game. So I can say so many things that are just so easy to say, which is like you should care for your users, you should listen to your users, you should do all these things which are basic, the basic background here. I think that's a good way to entertain and keep your users playing is, let them, if your game is designed like that, to let them have fun and, engage among each other. That would be something that at least I can see working. So we focus very much in the social interaction among our players within the game, and they just love it. They have friends. We have even, weddings that came out. Yeah. I mean, that I would say that's the upside of having a very, localized game. So people who can actually meet and fall in love.
Love it. Well, Martina, thank you so much for joining us. If people do have any questions or, maybe want to learn more about that growth role, is there a good way for them to get in contact with you?
Yeah, they can reach out to me on LinkedIn, or as you perfectly said, it's Martina Gianfreda. Or I don't know, I can leave you my email, or as you prefer.
Sure. Sounds good. All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you for having me. Bye-bye.
Bye.